Good morning, Friendship United Methodist Church. I'd like to welcome you on this 12th day of January 2025. Now, this is a story that I'm certain many of you have heard from the pulpit many times over the years. But three pastors got together for coffee one morning. They must have been Methodist. We love our coffee. But they got together for coffee one morning, and much to their surprise, they discovered that all of their churches had problems with bats infesting the belfries, where the bell towers were before all the modern churches came in. And the bats were making a terrible mess, as you can imagine. I got so angry, said one pastor, I took a shotgun and fired at them. It made holes in the ceiling, but did nothing to the bats. They're still there. I tried trapping them alive, said another pastor, and then I drove 50 miles before releasing them, and they beat me back to the church. I haven't had any more problems, said the third. What did you do? Well, I simply baptized them and confirmed them. I haven't seen them since. They just disappeared. Now, if that story doesn't make you laugh, it'll make you cry. It's such a common occurrence. People come to churches desiring Christian baptism and church membership, and we welcome them into our fellowship, not just friendship. All churches do that. We welcome them in, and they are regular attenders for 6 weeks or so, and then they just disappear. Nobody seems to know where they go, or, they can't get in contact with them. They invite them, again, but we don't hear anything from them. What does that mean? What does it mean? People come to church desiring Christian baptism or membership, and they just disappear. Or parents present a child at the altar for baptism and present it to God, and they make promises to bring that child up in the Christian faith, and the congregation replies, well, we will be there to help them if you don't, basically is what we're saying with that, and then they disappear, and we rarely see them again until they're ready to get married or buried. What did those promises mean? On this second Sunday of the new year, our lesson from the Gospels focuses our attention on the place of baptism in our lives. Jesus came to be baptized by John the Baptist. It was an interesting act of contrition. John the Baptist admitted that he wasn't worthy to lace, Jesus' thongs, or today as we'd call them, or sneakers. And yet Jesus joins the crowd that is being baptized by John. Dramatic moment for John and even for Jesus, for there came a voice from heaven, "Thou art my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." I can imagine that voice just bellowing, and John the Baptist must have been shocked as well. And those observing, wow. Do you think it changed him? What do you think? Do you think they were changed by that? I think they probably were. That's why we have churches today, because they went forth, they saw, they believed, they heard, and they're going to share the word. That was the way with the disciples. Baptism has always been at the heart of the Christian faith. It's a sign and symbol that a person belongs to Christ. It's a requirement for membership into the church. It's a sacrament, a means of grace. Why then, I must ask, it begs the question, Why do so many Christians take baptism so lightly? Perhaps we need to consider what baptism says to us. First of all, baptism says that it is God who has saved us, right? Certainly, it's not the water. Water's but a symbol. The story is told of an old mountain preacher who was baptizing converts at a revival meeting, much like the ones camp meetings I do in Georgia sometimes. And up stepped a wiry, sharp-eyed old man who said he wanted to be baptized too. The preacher led the man into the water, and he asked the usual questions. And was there any reason why the ordinance of baptism should not be administered? After a pause, tall, powerful-looking man stood. He had been watching quietly, and he remarked, "Preacher, I don't want to interfere in your business, but I want to say that this is an old, rugged sinner you have there, and that one drip won't do him a bit of good. You'll have to anchor him out in the water overnight." And that objector was right, friends. If the hope for cleansing was based on the efforts of the water, there was going to have to be a whole lot of water used. It's not the water that saves us. That's a symbol. Water itself has no saving power. And to be frank about it, neither does the strength of our belief. The focus of baptism is not on the believer, but on God. Grace, friends, is not something we earn, but something we receive as a free gift. Baptizing symbolizes a turning from sin. But it is God who delivers us from the power of the tempter, from Satan. It's not a victory of our will, but of God's grace freely given. That is why we always come to Christian baptism in an act of total humility. Baptism is a symbol of God's grace freely given. That's why I look around at church members as we perform baptisms. How are they reacting? See them whispering back and forth. Friends, this is a powerful moment in the life of the person being baptized. They're accepting God's grace freely given. Powerful. In Vienna, Austria, you will find a church in which the Habsburgs, the former ruling family of Austria, are buried. Now, it's said that when a royal funerals, when they finally arrive at the church for a burial mass, the mourners leading the procession knocks at the door to gain entrance. "Who is it that desires admission?" the priest asks through the locked door. "His Apostolic Majesty, the Emperor," calls the guard. "I don't know him," answers the priest. Second knock, and a similar question is asked. And this time the funeral guard announces the deceased is the highest emperor. And once again, "I do not know him," echoes through the chamber. Third knock. "Who is it?" "A poor sinner, your brother," comes the answer. Then the door is opened and the royal burial is completed. That is the proper attitude for baptism. Total and complete humility. It's not the water that saves us. It's not our own noble intentions that save us. It is God acting out of total and complete self-giving love that accepts us just as we are. Just as we are. That's the first thing we need to see. It is God that saves us. And here's the second, friends. It is God who calls us. Baptism is a free gift from God, but the purpose of baptism is to give us a new identity. The word baptizo was a term that was used in the first century for dipping a light-colored garment into a dye. And once the fabric was dipped into the dye, it would be changed in its identity from its original color to a new color. The act of dipping it resulted in changing its identity, and it was called baptizio. It is the Greek term from which we get our English word baptism. And once we were no people, says the Old Testament writer, but now we are God's people. That's what happens. It is God acting through the baptism. Baptism is a sign of God's call to us to be new people. Sue Monk Kidd, in her book, All Things Are Possible, says that so often when she opens a newspaper, she finds herself reading a depressing headline. Words in big letters shouting out a world threat, a crisis, another road rage, another mass shooting, just one thing after another. And there's surely a lot of bad news to read about these days. But one day she opened her town's paper and read a remarkable headline printed in half-inch letters. The headline read like this: I asked Jesus into my heart, and this story followed. During the night, my dogs had begun to bark furiously. And usually dogs barking signaled something amiss, that perhaps prowlers lurked nearby. I didn't hear anything unusual, but just the dogs barking. But the next morning, the couple discovered nothing had been taken. Instead, something had been returned. Outside the front door were 2 car speakers that had been stolen 6 weeks earlier. And a note attached to them read like this: I'm sorry that I took your speakers, but now I have repented my sins and asked Jesus to forgive me. I hope you will forgive me too. I no longer take other people's belongings. God has changed me. Not I changed, God has changed me. I'm a new creature since I asked Jesus into my heart, and it was signed simply, saved. It could have been signed, baptized. In fact, I like baptism better. Save connotes that we have been delivered from the power of sin, but baptism is more than that. Baptism means that we have put on a new life in Christ. It means that we have not only given up the old, the unsavory behavior that we had, but now we walk in the footsteps of the one who gave his life for us. How then can we come for baptism or confirmation and then disappear into the life of the Christian community? Walk away from it. Wall Street Journal once carried an article about the dramatic increases of fundamental Islam in Turkey, a country that has been relatively secular. They quoted a young Muslim Turk. Our view of religion is different from yours, he said to a Western visitor. According to your rules, he continued, religion counts only in the place where you pray. Our religion is a way of life. I have no time at all, not 1 minute, without Islam. Is that how the world views the Christian faith? Its rules apply only to its adherents while they're in church? Guys, where have we missed it? Where have we gone wrong? Why do we not understand that baptism means the beginning of a new life? Now, if you want me to paraphrase that young Muslim, I will. I have no time at all, not 1 minute without Christ. Hey, I can get excited about that. Yeah, that's what the Muslim would say. But I can say the same thing about Christ. I have no time, not 1 minute without Christ. Wouldn't that be great? Pastor Martin B. Hellriegel once returned to Hepperheim, Germany, where he had been born. And it was the place he had been baptized. And he would go to the parish church and put his hands reverently on the baptismal font and think these deep thoughts. They were thoughts of gratitude for all that he had received from his parents, from his church, and from God. They were thoughts of renewal and rededication to his calling to be a disciple, a Christian, a follower of Christ. It began with baptism right there at that font, right? The church was ancient. Generations before had received the same gift. How could he be faithless to that calling? Baptism signifies that it is God who has saved us, not ourselves. It is God who has called us. And finally, it is God who goes with us. Just as we do not come to baptism trusting in our merits, but in God's gracious love for us. Neither do we live the Christian life trusting in our strength. It's said that Martin Luther had his hours of doubt and despair, and in such hours he would face himself and the tempter with these words, "Baptismus sum, baptismus sum. I have been baptized. I have been baptized." Baptism is a reminder to us that we're not alone in the world, friends. Just as Jesus heard those words after his baptism, "Thou art my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased," so we too hear God's words. "You are my child. I am with you. You are not alone." Everyone in the small town where I grew up called her Grandma Mountain, Roberta Mountain. Bertie, we called her for short. And one late afternoon, Grandma Mountain looked out the window of her house to see a group of men on her porch. It was a familiar sight in coal fields. She knew what had happened before the men told her. Her husband had been killed in a mining accident. She, like everyone in the vicinity, heard the ambulance going up the road, the siren wailing, and they knew, we all knew, there'd been a mining accident. It's the only time we saw ambulances. And you wait and wait and wait for it to come back. And if there's no siren, you knew they were dead. So these men on her porch, she knew what they were there for. And the years passed slowly with great difficulty. Grandma Mountain was admired by everyone in the town for her courage and her unwavering faith. And she and her children attended church almost every week. There was another knock on her door. Her older son had been killed in another mining accident. Grandma Bertie grew older and weaker. And in the spring and in the summer, when the weather was warm, she'd be sitting out on that old wooden porch, painted gray, covered with soot stains from the passing cold rains, rocking back in her rocking chair, rocking back and forth, softly singing hymns of her faith that she had learned by heart. Children would gather around and listen to her tell stories, Bible stories. And then it happened again. Another son was killed in the mine. She heard the ambulance, and this time she just sensed that it was a son. And after the funeral, Grandma Birdie was again sitting on her porch, rocking in her favorite chair, softly singing one of the hymns of her faith. And one of the children who saw her sitting there said, "Grandma Mountain, aren't you sad today?" "No," she replied. "I'm not sad. Not that sad anyway, but sad. It's hard to say goodbye to someone you love," she said to the child. "And I've had to do it 3 times. But," she told the children, "I have something more than sadness inside of me." And then she spoke to them of her faith. "Can you give me some?" asked one of the children. "Why, children," Grandma Mountain replied, "I have been giving it to you for years. It's knowing that God loves you and that He has made one promise that it is a gift, the most valuable gift in the world. God promised that no matter what happens, no matter how good nor how bad, regardless of joy or sorrow, God will not leave you alone." And that's God's promise to each of us here today, friends. It goes part and parcel with our baptism. To understand that baptism is to become a new person. It is God who has saved us. It is God who calls us into a new life of service. It is God who goes with us. What good news that is. Baptism is some. I have been baptized. Yes. And you're thinking, "Pastor Bob, I've been baptized too. But I'm sitting here in the pews, and that's good. I come every Sunday. I listen. I want to share something with you. Every church that I know of, they have a goal. Do you know that? Every church has a goal, and that goal is, I want to grow. I want to see more people become Christians. I want to be there and help this. And every church, regardless of size, has roughly 10% of the people that do the work. It means 90% of the persons fill the church on Sunday mornings, and they're ready for the next Sunday and say, "We want to grow, we're there, we want to grow," yes. And it's the same ones that do the work. And they say, "We'll support them." I want to share something this morning. Now, I'm not going into how many we have here doing it, where we know it's few, but I would really like to see in 2025 that, and you guys are, I can see your looks now, the daggers are coming, I can see that. It's not committees, okay? It's not committees. I would like to see persons, maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4, you don't have to do these things every week, but more participation in helping, whether it's with the activities, well, we have an activity committee, you have 4 people, and those 4 people, they come up with the activities to do things, and it's their responsibility, right? They don't need help. They volunteered for it, right? No. Friends, they get old and tired too. We need everyone to participate. If you're going to have a growing church, friends, you're going to have everyone participating in one way or another. It may be in choir, we've said that before, and it may be on committees, but I don't want to go there on committees because we know those are hard to fill. but it may be simply saying, I can help with a car show, or, if the tea party, I can help with that. And I guarantee you, if you want to help, they're going to find something for you to do. They're not going to create, well, don't put it this way, don't do it, this so. They realize we're all different, we need to work together. We need to work together. Christ calls us to work together. He calls us to work together. He empowers us to work together. And we, as baptized Christians, need to work together to give God all the glory and thank Him. Thank God for Friendship United Methodist Church, or the First Baptist Church, or the Church of the Nazarene. Yeah. Friends, we all have our differences, but we're all going to the same reward. And through our baptism, we're assured of that. God bless. Amen.